Der Alienbären schenkt einem seine gelähmte Tochter zum Spaß. Matched Sci-Fi legend Elias Wren had worked on many alien worlds, but none of them felt as cold as Baron Kethral's estate. The sky above the planet was always gray, not from storms, but from high clouds that never moved. The air was clean, perfectly controlled, and empty of sound. Everything here was designed to show power, wealth, and distance. Elias felt small the moment he stepped off the transport platform. He was a human engineer, hired under a long contract he barely understood. The pay was high. The conditions were unclear. That alone should have warned him. 2 tall guards of the Baron's species waited for him. They were thin, long-limbed, and moved with slow confidence. Their black eyes reflected no emotion. "Follow," one of them said through a translator collar. Elias picked up his small bag and obeyed. He had learned long ago that asking questions too early often caused trouble. They walked through halls made of smooth stone and living metal. Light came from the walls themselves. No art, no decoration, only space and silence. Finally, they entered a wide chamber. The ceiling was high and the floor was polished to a mirror shine. At the far end sat Baron Kethral. The Baron was massive compared to the guards. His body rested on a floating platform decorated with symbols Elias did not recognize. His voice was deep and calm, carrying easily across the room. "So," the Baron said, "this is the human." Elias stopped and bowed slightly as he had been trained to do. "My name is Elias Wren," he said. "I am an engineer and systems specialist." "Yes, yes," the Baron replied, waving one thick limb. "Humans are known for fixing things, making broken tools work again." Elias felt uneasy at the word broken, but he said nothing. The Baron leaned forward slightly. "I called you here for entertainment." That was not a good sign. "I have a gift for you," the Baron continued. "A useless thing, one that failed its purpose." The Baron made a small gesture. A door on the side of the chamber slid open. 2 attendants entered, pushing a floating chair. In it sat a young alien woman. She was smaller than the Baron, her body slim and fragile-looking compared to the others. Her limbs lay still, resting unnaturally. Straps gently held her in place. Her eyes were open, very open. She was watching everything. Elias felt his breath catch. "This is my daughter, Larka," the Baron said, his tone casual. "She is paralyzed, has been for many cycles. Her mind works, but her body does not. She is no longer useful." Elias stared, unable to hide his shock. The Baron laughed softly. "Do not look so upset, human. She feels no pain. She feels nothing of importance." That was a lie. Elias could see it in her eyes. Larka was afraid. Not screaming fear, not panic, but something deeper. The fear of being forgot, the fear of being treated like an object. "She will be your responsibility now," the Baron said. "You may keep her, study her, fix her if you want, or ignore her. I do not care." Elias swallowed. "Why?" he asked before he could stop himself. The guards shifted slightly, but the Baron only smiled. "Because it amuses me," the Baron replied. "Humans like challenges. Let us see what you do with something that cannot be repaired." The floating chair moved forward and stopped in front of Elias. Up close, he noticed more details. Small lines of silver ran along Larka's neck and spine, old medical implants. Outdated, abandoned. Her breathing was slow and steady. Her eyes locked onto his. She blinked once. Deliberately, Elias felt something twist in his chest. "I am not a doctor," he said carefully. "You are human," the Baron replied. "That is enough." The Baron leaned back. "Take her. You will be housed in the lower quarters. If you grow bored, you may return her. Or dispose of her." Elias clenched his jaw but said nothing. The audience was over. The guards led him away, this time with Larka floating beside him. The lower quarters were far from the main halls. The lights were dimmer, the walls less polished. The silence felt heavier. They reached a small living space. Basic, clean, empty. The guards left without a word. The door closed. Elias stood there for a long moment, unsure what to do. Then he moved. He approached Larka slowly, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers. "My name is Elias," he said gently. "I don't know what your father told you, but I want you to know something." Her eyes flickered. "I don't see you as a thing." She stared at him, unblinking. He noticed a small device near her temple, a communication implant likely disabled. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyes shifted slightly to the side. Yes, that single movement told him everything. Elias exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said, "that's a start." He examined the chair controls, old, locked, limited. "Did anyone ever ask you what you wanted?" he asked softly. No response, but her gaze sharpened. That answer was also clear. Elias stood and began unpacking his tools, small scanners, diagnostic pads, nothing advanced, but enough to begin asking questions. "I can't promise miracles," he said. "I can't promise I can fix anything." He paused. "But I promise this, I will not treat you like a joke." Her eyes widened just a little. He ran a scanner along her spinal implants. The readings surprised him. They were not damaged. They were inactive, deliberately limited. "Someone turned you off," he murmured, like his breathing changed slightly. Elias felt anger rise in his chest, slow and controlled, not violent anger, focused anger. The kind that led humans to solve problems no one else bothered to understand. He sat beside her. "They gave up on you," he said. "That doesn't mean you're broken." He looked at the data again. The signal pathways were complex, alien, different, but not impossible. Not ignored, abandoned. Elias smiled faintly. "That's your father's mistake," he said quietly, like a blinked, once, twice. For the first time, her eyes were no longer afraid, they were curious. And somewhere deep inside Baron Kethral's vast estate, a joke had just begun to turn into a legend. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Elias Wren sat on a low stool beside Larka's floating chair. A thin screen of blue light hovered in the air, showing lines, symbols, and signals that only partly made sense to him. Alien systems always did that, familiar enough to tease understanding, different enough to demand patience. He had been working for hours, not fixing, listening. Most engineers started by changing things. Elias had learned that rushing only broke more than it healed. So he watched the data flow. He watched how Larka's body reacted to tiny changes in signal strength. He watched her eyes most of all. They never left him. "You're very observant," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Larka blinked once. Elias smiled. He was already learning her language, not words, signals. He adjusted the scanner again and frowned. The spinal implants were old but well made. Too well made to fail naturally. The signal limiters were precise, layered, and hidden. Whoever designed them did not want her to recover. "That's not an accident," Elias said. Larka's breathing slowed. Her eyes hardened just slightly. "Yes," Elias continued. "I see it too." He pulled up a comparison model from his own device. Human neural assist technology stripped down to basics. Primitive by galactic standards, but flexible, adaptable. Human technology always was. "Your people build perfect systems," he said. "Ours are messy." But messy things can change. He noticed something interesting. Whenever he adjusted the frequency by a very small amount, Larka's fingers twitched not visibly but on the internal sensors, micro-responses, hidden but real. His heart beat faster. "You're still connected," he whispered. "They just told everyone you were." Larka's eyes widened. She tried to move, nothing happened. Frustration flashed across her face, sharp and painful. Elias raised his hands slightly. "It's okay, I know." He lowered the scanner and leaned closer so she could see his face clearly. "I need to ask you something," he said. "You can't speak yet, but you can answer." He took a breath. "Did this happen suddenly or slowly?" Larka stared at him. Then after a long moment her eyes moved slowly upward. Slowly. Elias nodded. "Gradual," he said. "That means it was controlled." He stood and paced the room, thinking. Alien medicine focused on perfection. If something could not be fully restored, it was often removed. Or ignored. Humans were different. Humans built ramps instead of erasing stairs. Elias stopped pacing. "No one asked how your brain works," he said. "They just compared it to a standard model and gave up." He returned to the console and began building a simulation, not a fix but a conversation, a simple interface that translated intention, not movement. "Okay," he said, "let's try something new." He connected a small sensor band near her temple. It glowed faintly. "This won't make you move," he explained. "Not yet, this only listens." He activated the program. At first, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. A single signal spike appeared. Elias froze. "Did you do that?" he asked softly. Another spike, stronger. Elias laughed, unable to stop himself. "You did." Larka's eyes shone. He felt a strange tightness in his throat. He had repaired ships worth more than small moons, but this mattered more. "You're still here," he said. "They never lost you." He adjusted the system carefully, translating the spikes into simple outputs. A dot appeared on the screen. "One spike," Elias said. "One dot." He changed the parameters. 2 spikes, 2 dots. Larka watched closely. "You're learning faster than my software," he said with a quiet grin. Hours passed without them noticing. For the first time since entering the Baron's estate, Elias forgot where he was. Then the door chimed. Elias stiffened. An attendant stood outside. "The Baron requests a status update," the translator said. Elias took a breath and opened the door slightly. "She is stable," he said. "No change." That was not a lie. The attendant studied him, then nodded and left. Elias closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. "They don't need to know yet," he said quietly. Laika blinked slowly. Agreement. He returned to her side. "Okay," he said. "Let's go further." He refined the interface overnight, reduced noise, filtered signals, removed alien restrictions and replaced them with human tolerance ranges. By the next cycle, the dots on the screen had turned into symbols. Simple ones: yes, no, curious, angry, hopeful. When the symbol for hope appeared, Elias stared at it for a long time. "That one," he said softly. "That's dangerous." Laika's eyes softened. "You haven't felt that in a while, have you?" She held his gaze. "No," Elias nodded. "We'll be careful then." He taught her slowly, one thought at a time. She learned fast, too fast. By the third cycle, she was forming patterns, strategies, questions, logic loops. Her mind was sharp, sharper than most beings Elias had worked with. One symbol appeared again and again. "Why?" Elias smiled. "Because your father was wrong," he said. "Because giving up is easy. Because listening takes effort." He paused. "And because you matter." The symbol for confusion appeared, then interest. Elias laughed quietly. "Yeah, humans confuse people like that." He leaned back in his chair, exhausted but happy. Somewhere above them, Baron Kethral hosted a gathering. Laughter echoed faintly through the structure. The Baron spoke proudly of his strength, his wisdom, his control. He did not speak of his daughter. Down below in a small, forgotten room, a human engineer and a paralyzed alien woman were doing something far more dangerous than rebellion. They were understanding each other. As the cycle ended, Elias noticed something new. Laika's finger moved. Not much, just enough. Enough to be undeniable. Elias stared. "Did you feel that?" he asked. She did not need symbols for this, her eyes filled with emotion. "Yes." Elias leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "That," he said, "was not an accident." Outside the room, unseen and unnoticed, the foundations of a legend were quietly taking shape. The morning light in Baron Kethral's estate was dim and cold, as always. Elias Wren was already awake, seated beside Laika's floating chair. He had spent most of the night adjusting sensors, rewriting signal pathways, and mapping the faint neural activity she produced. For hours, he had listened to her mind, translating tiny spikes into thoughts, questions, and emotions. "Good morning," he said softly. "Did you sleep at all?" Laika's eyes blinked slowly in response. She did not speak, could not yet, but her gaze seemed thoughtful. Her eyes followed his movements, sharp, intelligent, and curious. Elias had learned to read her eyes better than he read most screens. "You're ready," he said quietly. "Let's see if we can do more today." He activated the interface, a simple human-designed neural reader and stimulator. It hummed softly as it synced with her implants. Elias had created it to communicate with her, but also to encourage movement. Small, precise pulses that could awaken dormant pathways. He adjusted the settings carefully, lowering intensity to a near imperceptible level. He did not want to startle her. He wanted cooperation, curiosity, not fear. A tiny twitch appeared at the base of Laika's left hand. Elias froze, his eyes widened, staring at the data screen. "Did you do that?" he asked, her eyes focused on him, unblinking. A single brow lifted, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," he whispered. "You moved." It was the first voluntary movement she had made in cycles. Elias let out a long breath. "That's huge," he said softly, a smile breaking across his face. He had repaired ships that would have taken months in a matter of weeks, but nothing felt like this. Nothing mattered like this. Laika's finger twitched again, slightly stronger. "Careful," he said. "Don't push too hard. Let your body remember itself slowly." He noted the patterns. Each micro-movement caused a feedback response in her brain's signals. The pathways were being used again, awakening tiny muscles and reflexes. Elias' mind raced with possibilities. With patience, she could regain far more than anyone thought possible. For the next hour, they practiced small movements. A finger here, a wrist there, a subtle shift of her hand. Elias guided her gently, never forcing, never rushing. Laika responded with increasing clarity, her eyes sparking as though she understood the lessons as well as the exercises. "You are learning fast," Elias said. "Faster than I expected. You always were smart." Her eyes reflected understanding, or maybe amusement. Elias was not sure. Then came a small breakthrough. Laika's hand twitched upward, not fully, but enough to brush lightly against a tablet he had placed beside her chair. She froze, and Elias' heart leapt. "That's it," he said. "You did that." Her eyes widened slightly. There was a spark of pride in them, almost childlike. She had never smiled before, but Elias imagined she was trying. He reached for a stylus and handed it to her. It hovered in her grasp, controlled by small micro-movements. Elias held his breath. Laika's hand trembled but remained steady enough to touch the screen. A dot appeared, then another. Slowly, deliberately, she traced simple lines. "Good," Elias said softly. "You just drew something." The dot became a small triangle. Elias recognized it immediately. In her species' language, it meant attention. "You are telling me something," he said. "Yes, you want to talk?" She blinked rapidly in response. He interpreted it as yes. Elias adjusted the interface to translate her micro-movements into symbols on the screen. He created a simple system, left and right for letters, up for a space, down for a pause, nothing advanced but enough to communicate basic words. "Hello," Elias wrote on a nearby screen. He pointed to it and waited. Laika's finger twitched. Slowly, she traced the symbols for hello. Elias' chest tightened. "You did that," he said. "You just spoke, not with words, but with your mind." A long pause followed. Laika's eyes were focused, studying him. Elias smiled softly. "I think you like this," he said. Her hand moved again, slowly spelling. "Why? Why?" Elias read aloud. "Why what?" She traced again. "Why did he give me away?" Elias' jaw tightened. "Your father," he said. "The Baron, he doesn't understand how special you are. That's why he made a mistake." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Her gaze seemed to pierce him. Elias felt uncomfortable but did not flinch. "He thinks you are useless," Elias said, carefully choosing his words. "But I don't. I see what you are, and I will help you." Her hand trembled slightly as she traced, "Help me." "Yes," Elias said firmly. "I will help you. I don't care what anyone else thinks. You are not useless." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Laika's eyes softened. Elias imagined her feeling relief. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. They continued this way for hours. Words became sentences. Thoughts became questions. Laika's mind was sharp, curious, and strong. She asked about human customs, about technology, about the stars. Elias answered as best he could. He told her stories of planets he had visited, of strange inventions humans had created, of resilience and creativity. Each story sparked another question. "You have a bright mind," he said. "No one can take that away from you." "Not your father, not the universe." Her fingers twitched again. This time she lifted her arm slightly, not much but enough to make Elias gasp. "You moved your arm," he said softly. "That's incredible." For the first time she looked proud. Her eyes shone with a sense of possibility. Elias realized something important. This was not just about movement. It was about recognition, about being seen, about being treated as a person, not an object. And that was something humans did better than anyone else. Over the next cycle, they practiced systematically. Elias mapped her signals, created exercises, and encouraged her to try new movements. She lifted a hand, flexed a wrist, and even shifted slightly in her chair. Each movement was celebrated. Elias clapped softly, spoke words of encouragement, and never once treated her like a burden. Outside in the Baron's halls, servants whispered about the human engineer. "He has patience," they said. "No one else would spend time like this." But no one suspected the truth. No one understood what was happening in the small, quiet room. By the end of the day, Laika had learned to control several muscles intentionally. Not enough to stand or walk, but enough to interact meaningfully. Her intelligence shone through every gesture. Her mind was alive, growing stronger each hour. Elias leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. He watched her eyes, bright and curious, and he knew something important. This was only the beginning. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we will try something new, something bigger." Laika blinked slowly. Elias interpreted it as agreement. They sat together in quiet harmony. No one else in the vast estate knew. No one else cared, and that was perfect. Somewhere far above them, Baron Kethral laughed again, thinking his gift was a joke. But below, in a small room filled with soft light and humming machines, a legend was quietly beginning. The girl who was supposed to be forgotten was awakening, and the human who listened was guiding her. By the end of the cycle, Elias understood something clearly. This was not just engineering. This was partnership. This was trust. This was hope. And hope was more powerful than any weapon the Baron could offer. The halls of Baron Kethral's estate had never been lively. Guests walked through polished floors, whispering in careful tones. Servants moved with quiet efficiency, and the Baron sat in his high chamber, confident that everything ran according to his will. Yet in a small, dim room far below the main halls, something extraordinary was happening. Elia's Wren adjusted the neural interface for the 5th cycle. Laika's chair floated steadily, sensors flickering softly as they read the subtle signals from her muscles and mind. Today would be different, he felt it. "You're ready," he said quietly, kneeling beside her. "Let's try something new." Laika's eyes blinked slowly, then focused on him. She understood. Elia's activated the interface. A small screen displayed simple prompts: move hand, lift arm, flex wrist. She hesitated only briefly. Then deliberately she lifted her hand, not fully but higher than she ever had before. Her fingers moved in precise sequences across the tablet. Elia's chest tightened. "You're doing it," he whispered. "You're really doing it." Her eyes sparkled with the thrill of progress. She was learning fast, faster than he had imagined, and faster than anyone else in the Baron's halls would believe possible. Elias worked patiently, guiding her through small motions. Lift hand, rotate wrist, flex fingers. Each success was celebrated with words, encouragement, and small visual symbols on the screen. Hours passed. Then for the first time, Laika reached forward and touched Elia's hand, not just a twitch or a brush, but a purposeful touch. Elias froze, staring at the contact. You did that," he said softly. Her eyes widened. A tiny smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Elias realized it was her first real smile in years, maybe ever. "This," he said quietly, "is just the beginning." By the next cycle, Elias felt ready to show her progress beyond their private room. Not to the Baron, not yet, but to a small group of trusted staff who could help her. He had observed how they moved through the halls, always quiet, always obedient. Some of them had noticed small changes, her micro-movements, the faint glow of her interface, but no one had guessed the truth. "Today," Elias said, "you will meet others, people who will see you as you are, not as a useless daughter of a Baron." Laika's eyes showed curiosity. Understanding, agreement. They moved carefully through the estate, Elias guiding her with gentle words. Staff paused as they passed. Some whispered, others stared. A few shook their heads in disbelief. They had been told she was incapable, useless. Now her arm lifted slightly, her fingers pointed with precision, and her mind clearly active. "Look," Elias said softly, "they will see you soon." The first staff member to approach was a medical technician. She had worked with Laika for cycles, always recording data, never interacting. She stopped as soon as she saw the small movements Elias had helped her achieve. "She moved?" the technician asked quietly. "Yes," Elias said, "and she will do more." The technician hesitated, then extended a hand carefully. Laika lifted her own hand and touched it. The contact was brief but deliberate. The technician's eyes widened. "Impossible," she whispered. "No," Elias said, "not impossible." She just needed someone to see her, to listen to her, and to give her a chance. Word spread slowly. Others began to gather quietly, watching as Laika lifted her arm, flexed her wrist, and traced simple shapes in the air. Each movement, small as it was, carried power. Not because it was extraordinary in the abstract sense, but because it defied the expectations placed upon her. Laika's eyes followed Elia's constantly. She trusted him, yes, but she also learned from him. Every nod, every gentle word, every subtle smile reinforced the idea that she could do more than anyone had thought. By mid-cycle, she was performing deliberate sequences, moving one hand, then the other, lifting arms slightly, interacting with objects placed in front of her. Elias adjusted the interface to record every motion, translating them into symbols and letters. Her first full word appeared on the screen. "Hello," the staff gasped. She spelled it again, slowly, deliberately. Then traced another. Then another, AM, and finally, Laika. "I am Laika," Elias exhaled slowly, a soft smile on his face. "Yes," he said, "you are, and they will see that too." Her gaze moved to the staff. She watched their reactions. Some were shocked, some were curious. One older technician shook her head in disbelief, murmuring, "All these years?" Elias understood. That simple phrase, that small declaration of identity, was more than words. It was recognition. It was the first act of independence she had performed since her paralysis began. "She is learning," Elias said softly to the gathering. "She has always been smart, she only needed someone to guide her." The staff nodded slowly, some smiled, some looked at Larka with new respect. Elias turned to her. "Do you want to try more?" Larka's eyes shone brightly. She lifted both hands, flexing fingers, tracing shapes in the air, interacting with Elia's small devices. Each movement was careful but confident. Her mind worked fast, coordinating signals and motion with remarkable accuracy. For the first time, she seemed like herself. Not the paralyzed daughter of a baron, not an object or a joke. She was Larka, intelligent, capable, and alive. Hours passed. The staff returned to their duties, whispering among themselves. Larka rested briefly, her eyes on Elias, absorbing every word, every gesture, every lesson. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we will try standing, not fully, just a little, step by step." She blinked, almost smiling. Elias interpreted it as agreement. In the Baron's chamber, far above, Kethral laughed. He spoke to a small audience, proud of his control and power. He believed his daughter remained useless, his gift to Elias merely a joke. He did not know. Below, in a quiet room filled with humming machines and soft light, Larka's story was changing. The girl who had been forgotten was awakening, not fully yet, but surely. And Elias, the human who had chosen to see her as she was guiding her every step. By the end of the cycle, Larka could lift her hands freely. She could trace letters, she could declare her identity, she could interact with others. Elias watched her, exhausted but elated. He understood something crucial. This was not just recovery, it was transformation. Not through force, not through punishment, not through violence, but through patience, understanding, and ingenuity, the qualities humans carried best. And somewhere deep in the Baron's estate, a legend quietly began to take shape, one that no one would have predicted. One that would grow slowly but surely, beyond walls, beyond the Baron, beyond expectations. Larka was no longer a gift, no longer an object. She was awakening. And Elias knew this. The world would notice one day, but for now it was just them, teacher and student. Engineer and mind, human and alien, together they were unstoppable. The estate of Baron Kethral was vast, its halls echoing with quiet efficiency. The Baron sat in his chamber, surrounded by advisors, enjoying the illusion that everything was under control. His daughter, Larka, was supposed to remain an object of amusement or neglect. But in a small room far below, the quiet hum of machines told a different story. Larka was no longer the fragile, motionless girl she had been. With Elias Wren's guidance, she was learning to move, to communicate, and to think beyond the limits others had imposed upon her. Elias adjusted the interface once more, ensuring the neural signals flowed smoothly. He had created a system of simple gestures, micro-movements, and visual symbols to communicate with her. Each day brought small victories, and today was no different. "Are you ready?" Elias asked softly. Larka's eyes focused on him, sharp and alert. She nodded slightly, a small, deliberate movement. "Good," Elias said. "Today we try coordination." He placed two small objects in front of her, a sphere and a cube. He instructed her to lift the sphere with one hand, the cube with the other, slowly, carefully. Her fingers twitched. She lifted the sphere first, then the cube, not perfectly but intentionally. She had control, she had awareness, she had confidence. "Excellent," Elias said quietly. "You are learning faster than I thought possible." Larka's eyes sparkled with a mixture of pride and excitement. Elias watched her closely. This was not just progress, it was transformation. She was becoming her own person again. By mid-cycle, they had added more challenges, picking up small tools, pressing buttons, and tracing letters on a screen. Larka responded with precision, growing more confident with each attempt. Elias smiled. "You are doing more than anyone expected. You are teaching them a lesson without saying a word." Larka's eyes widened slightly. She understood. This was more than exercises. This was proof that intelligence and willpower could not be ignored or silenced. Word of her progress began to spread quietly through the estate. Servants whispered, technicians marveled. Even some of the Baron's advisors began to take notice. They had always believed Larka to be incapable, a useless child of the Baron. Now she was showing them otherwise. One afternoon, a senior technician approached Elias. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. She moved her arm again, the technician said softly. "I have never seen anything like it." "Yes," Elias said calmly. "She has always been capable. She only needed someone to listen, to guide her, and to believe in her." The technician hesitated. "Do you think others will see her like this?" Elias nodded. "Eventually, and when they do, they will understand that giving up on someone is a mistake." Larka, sitting in her floating chair, watched the exchange closely. Her eyes seemed to glow with understanding. She was learning not just to move, but to think strategically, to recognize patterns, to observe. By the next cycle, Elias had created a larger exercise. He placed a series of small levers and buttons in front of her, each connected to lights and simple mechanisms. The task was to activate them in a specific order. Larka's fingers twitched as she began. First the lever, then a button, then another. Lights flickered on in sequence. Small mechanical arms moved, picking up blocks and placing them in order. Elias watched, amazed. Her mind was fast, precise, and focused. She was solving problems in ways even he had not anticipated. "See," he said softly. "You are teaching everyone a lesson, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with your mind, with your actions." Larka's eyes glimmered. Elias understood her now better than ever. She was not only learning, she was beginning to plan, to anticipate. To imagine possibilities beyond the small room, beyond the estate, even beyond her father's expectations. News of her progress eventually reached Baron Kethral, though he believed it was minor, inconsequential. He summoned Elias to report. Elias entered the Baron's chamber, careful to maintain his composure. "My daughter," the Baron asked, his tone casual. "Have you done anything?" "Yes, Baron," Elias replied, calm and measured. "She is progressing well. She is learning to communicate and move with guidance." The Baron laughed softly. "Guidance? She is my daughter. She is unimportant. Do not waste your time." Elias met the Baron's gaze steadily. "Respectfully, sir, she is far more capable than anyone realizes. Under the right guidance, she can do things others thought impossible." The Baron's eyes narrowed. "Impossible? Do not exaggerate, human." Elias remained silent, letting the truth of his words linger. Larka's progress was already undeniable. Returning to the small room, Elias found her waiting, eyes sharp and attentive. "They doubt you," he said softly, "but that doesn't matter. You know what you can do, and they will see it soon." Larka blinked. A small, deliberate movement. Elias interpreted it as agreement. Over the next cycles, Elias increased the complexity of their exercises. Larka learned to lift small objects with precision, activate devices in sequence, and even respond to verbal cues with movement. Each success reinforced her confidence. She began to understand strategy, planning her actions to achieve results. Her mind was alive, quick, and growing stronger every day. Elias watched with quiet pride. "You are teaching them without words," he said. "They will learn from you even if they do not realize it yet." The staff and technicians continued to observe, slowly acknowledging what was happening. Whispers grew louder. Some were amazed, others skeptical. But the truth was undeniable. Larka was learning. She was progressing. She was extraordinary. By the end of the cycle, Elias had made one final adjustment for the day. A small platform beside her chair allowed her to attempt a tiny lift with her legs. Not enough to stand, but enough to feel the sensation of support and balance. Larka concentrated, flexing her muscles in careful sequences. The platform moved slightly, raising her body a few centimeters. She looked at Elias, eyes wide with wonder. "You did it," he said softly. "You are learning to stand even just a little. Imagine what you could do tomorrow." Her gaze was steady, focused, determined. Elias smiled. "You are not just moving," he said. "You are teaching everyone a lesson, that humanity, our patience, our ingenuity, our belief in each other, is stronger than any obstacle." And in that quiet room, far below the Baron's halls, the lesson spread. It was not announced. It did not need to be. It was lived. It was felt. The girl who was supposed to be forgotten was no longer helpless. The human who saw her, believed in her, and guided her was quietly changing the perception of everyone around them. One day, they would look back and see the moment when Larka began to awaken not only as herself, but as a symbol of possibility. And Elias knew with certainty that this was only the beginning. The Baron's laughter echoed faintly in the upper halls, unaware of the quiet revolution happening below. Larka was no longer a passive object. She was active, aware, and growing stronger every day. And in her small victories, everyone watching began to realize the lesson of humanity. Patience, guidance, belief, and ingenuity could achieve what force and power never could. Baron Kethral's chamber was vast and high, filled with shadows that stretched across polished floors. The Baron sat upon his floating dais, flanked by advisors, his expression calm but calculated. He believed himself untouchable, in full control of his daughter and his domain. But today, something felt different. Whispers had reached him, small murmurs that unsettled even his carefully maintained composure. Technicians, staff, and servants spoke quietly of Larka, of subtle movements, of small gestures, of intelligence awakening where none had expected. The Baron dismissed the first reports. He leaned back, confident. "It is human exaggeration," he said. "They have overactive imaginations. Nothing has changed." Yet the reports persisted. More staff observed her progress. The girl who had been discarded, the object of his amusement, was no longer invisible. He summoned Elias Wren to report again. The human engineer entered, calm and composed. Elias had grown used to the Baron's presence, never intimidated, always steady. "Baron Kethral," Elias said, bowing slightly, "I bring an update on your daughter." The Baron's eyes narrowed. "Speak." "She has made significant progress," Elias replied evenly. "She can move her arms with intention, communicate through symbols, and interact with objects. Her mind is active and strategic. She is learning." The Baron's tone sharpened. "Learning, human, do not exaggerate. She is my daughter, but she is limited. You cannot change that." Elias did not flinch. "With guidance, patience, and the right methods, she is capable of far more than anyone believed. She is extraordinary." The Baron leaned forward slightly, a faint frown crossing his features. "You speak as if she is more than a child, more than my daughter." "She is human in the sense that humans recognize potential," Elias said quietly. "She is capable of growth, of problem-solving, of learning. You cannot undo that." The Baron's eyes narrowed further. "Do you mean to suggest I was wrong?" Elias held his gaze. "I am only stating the facts. She is growing stronger every day." A silence fell over the chamber. The Baron, powerful and feared, rarely found himself unsettled, yet the truth had a way of slipping past armor. "Show me," the Baron finally said. "I want to see this myself." Elias inclined his head. "As you wish." The Baron followed, floating effortlessly above the polished floors, to the room far below where Larka sat in her chair. The staff had been instructed to remain discreet, observing quietly. Larka's eyes brightened at Elias' presence. She understood. She had learned to anticipate his guidance, to trust him implicitly. "Baron Kethral," Elias said softly, "observe what she can do. She has learned step by step to regain control over her body and mind." Larka's fingers twitched, then lifted carefully. She traced symbols on the tablet, spelling a greeting. "Hello, Father." The Baron's expression shifted. He had expected a simple nod, a minimal response, perhaps a polite gesture. Instead, his daughter addressed him deliberately, intentionally, with clarity. Elias watched the moment, remaining quiet. He had done his part. Now it was time for the Baron to see the lesson for himself. Larka's next actions were deliberate. She lifted small objects, pressing buttons in sequence to complete a task. The lights flickered, mechanisms moved, and the small platform beside her chair shifted slightly as she adjusted her balance. "Impossible," one advisor whispered. The Baron's eyes were sharp. How did this happen?" Elias said calmly. "She was never incapable. She only lacked guidance, trust, and someone who believed in her. Humanity sees potential where others give up. That is the difference." The Baron's face grew tense. He had always believed in control, in power, in the certainty that objects and people under his authority were tools to serve him. Yet here, in this quiet room, the tools of control had been replaced by understanding, patience, and human ingenuity. Larka traced another sequence of letters. "I can learn, I can grow, I can be myself." The Baron's jaw tightened. His daughter was not just moving. She was asserting herself, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with intelligence. Elias continued, his voice steady and calm. "This is the lesson, Baron. Giving up on someone is not inevitable. Intelligence and willpower, when nurtured, can overcome neglect. Compassion, patience, and guidance are stronger than force or indifference." The Baron looked at his daughter, the realization slowly dawning. She was not helpless. She was not a plaything. She was alive, aware, capable, and she had learned to show it in her own way. Larka's hands moved in a coordinated sequence, completing a task that even trained staff had struggled with. Her eyes, bright and focused, never left Elias' face, then flicked to the Baroness. "You see," Elias asked softly, "this is what humans do. We see potential, we guide, we believe, and we teach lessons without confrontation, without force." The Baron's expression was unreadable. He had underestimated the human, and even more, he had underestimated his own daughter. Larka traced another message. "I am not a joke. I am alive." The Baron's voice, usually so commanding, was softer this time. You have grown. he said, almost hesitantly. Yes, Elias replied, and she will continue to grow, not for power, not for revenge, but because that is what humans, what we do. We help each other realize who we are. The Baron's face softened slightly. He had always demanded obedience, yet here he saw something different. Respect earned, not demanded. Authority challenged, not with force, but with skill and intelligence. Larka's hand moved again, demonstrating a coordinated series of gestures that completed a small task on the console. It was perfect, precise, intentional. You see it, Elias said quietly. She is capable, she is extraordinary. And she has learned that through trust and guidance, not coercion. The Baron remained silent for a long moment, then looked down at his daughter. Something in him shifted. He had expected weakness, dependency, failure. Instead, he found strength, independence, and intelligence. Laika's gaze met his, steady and calm. She was no longer the powerless girl he had thought she was. She was herself, fully. Elias placed a hand lightly on her chair. This is only the beginning, he said. She will continue to grow, and so will everyone who believes in her. That is the true lesson of humanity. The Baron looked away, conflicted but attentive. The lesson was undeniable. He had sought amusement, control, and obedience. Instead, he had witnessed understanding, patience, and intelligence surpass expectation. He had underestimated humans. He had underestimated his daughter. Elias stepped back, allowing Laika to demonstrate her capabilities further. She moved small objects, traced symbols, and completed tasks that required coordination and problem-solving. Each success, quiet as it was, reinforced the lesson. The Baron remained, watching, learning in silence. For the first time, he understood that control and power were not the only forms of influence. Trust, patience, and guidance could achieve what authority alone could never do. Laika rested for a moment, her eyes on Elias. He nodded, smiling softly. You have taught them all a lesson, he said. Not with force, not with anger, but with intelligence and willpower. That is human strength. The Baron's expression softened slightly. He realized that he had not failed in raising his daughter. She had succeeded, through guidance, understanding, and belief, not despite his authority, but in a way he had never anticipated. Laika's journey was far from complete. She would continue to grow, to learn, and to inspire. And Elias had shown that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or weapons, but patience, guidance, and faith in potential. In that quiet room, a powerful transformation had occurred. The girl who had been forgotten was awakening, fully alive and fully aware. The human who had believed in her had shown what could happen when intelligence, patience, and compassion were applied. The Baron, for all his pride and authority, had learned something he could not ignore. The human lesson of trust, guidance, and human ingenuity had triumphed, and the quiet revolution of understanding and growth had only just begun. The estate of Baron Kethral had changed. The polished halls remained, the floating platforms glided silently, and the Baron still ruled with authority. But beneath the surface, a quiet revolution was unfolding. Laika sat in her floating chair, now more agile than ever, her hands moving with precision and intention. Her mind was sharp, alert, and creative. With Elias Wren's guidance, she had learned to move, to communicate, and to interact with her environment in ways no one had imagined possible. Elias stood beside her, adjusting a small interface and monitoring her progress. He had been with her from the very beginning, believing in her when no one else had. Today was special. Today, Laika would show the wider estate just how extraordinary she had become. Are you ready? Elias asked softly. Laika's eyes sparkled with determination. She nodded. Good, he said. Remember, show them what you can do, but take your time. This is your moment. The door to the main hall opened. Technicians, staff, and advisors had gathered quietly, curious and cautious. They had heard rumors of Laika's progress, whispers that grew louder each day. Now they were about to see it for themselves. Elias guided her forward. Her chair floated smoothly, controlled by small hand movements and micro-adjustments she had mastered over weeks of patient training. She lifted her hands and began a sequence of precise gestures, activating devices, lights, and small mechanisms in a flawless display. Gasps of astonishment filled the hall. Staff members whispered, some in disbelief, others in awe. Laika's abilities were more than they had imagined. She was not only moving, she was solving problems, coordinating tasks, and demonstrating intelligence that surpassed expectations. The Baron watched from above, his expression unreadable at first. He had summoned Elias and Larka to witness her progress, confident it would be minor. But now, seeing her in action, he understood that this was no small achievement. Elias stepped aside, allowing Larka to demonstrate independently. She lifted small objects, pressed buttons in sequence, and traced symbols on a floating screen. Each action was deliberate, precise, and intelligent. She was showing them not only what she could do, but who she truly was. For the first time, the estate saw Larka as a person, not a toy or a burden. The staff, technicians, and even the advisors began to whisper to each other, realizing the truth. The girl who had been discarded was extraordinary. Larka traced a final sequence on the screen, spelling words that no one had expected. "I am Larka. I am alive. I am capable." The hall fell silent. Every eye was on her. Every mind understood the message. The Baron floated closer, his gaze fixed on his daughter. He had always believed in control, in power and authority. Now he saw the strength of patience, guidance, and human ingenuity. He had underestimated not only the human beside her, but his own daughter. Elias stepped forward. "This is the lesson, Baron," he said softly. Patience, trust, and belief in someone's potential can achieve what authority and force cannot. Humans see possibilities where others give up. That is our strength. The Baron remained silent, processing the truth. He had thought he could define his daughter's worth. He had been wrong. She was not a gift, a toy, or a source of amusement. She was a mind, alive and brilliant, capable of growth and achievement. Larka's eyes met his. There was no defiance, no anger, only clarity and awareness. She had learned more than movement. She had learned confidence, strategy, and self-recognition. Elias watched quietly. The bond they had formed over months of patient guidance had created something extraordinary. A partnership that showed the estate what humanity could achieve when it believed in potential. The Baron finally spoke. "You have grown beyond what I expected," he said, his voice soft but steady. "I underestimated you." Larka's eyes softened, not in submission but in understanding. She had achieved recognition without confrontation, without anger, without rebellion. She had achieved it through intelligence and willpower. The staff, technicians, and advisors exchanged looks. The lesson had reached everyone. Respect was earned, not demanded. Potential was revealed, not dictated. Over the next cycles, Larka's abilities continued to grow. She learned to manipulate devices with both hands independently, solve complex problems, and communicate clearly using symbols and gestures. The staff who once doubted her now observed in awe and admiration. Elias guided her carefully, teaching strategy and logic but allowing her to make her own decisions. She had learned to anticipate outcomes, solve tasks efficiently, and act with independence. Each success reinforced her confidence and autonomy. Word of her abilities spread beyond the estate. Other colonies, listening stations, and distant observers began to hear whispers of the girl who had been forgotten but had awakened through human guidance. Larka became a symbol of what could be achieved through patience, ingenuity, and trust. The Baron, once proud and dismissive, now observed her with respect. He had learned a lesson that no amount of authority could teach. Underestimation of potential could be costly. Recognition, belief, and guidance could achieve what force and control could not. One afternoon, Larka approached Elias. Her fingers moved gracefully across the interface, spelling words that made him smile. "Thank you." Elias nodded. "You did the work, Larka. I only guided you." "You believed, you persisted. You are the one who achieved this." Her eyes shone. She had learned to move, to communicate, and to think. She had learned that her life had value, that intelligence and willpower could overcome neglect. In the following weeks, Larka began to teach others in the estate. She guided staff, technicians, and even younger members of her species, showing them exercises for coordination, problem-solving, and mental agility. Her methods were gentle, patient, and precise, inspired by the human lessons she had learned. The estate, once a place of control and indifference, became a center of growth and learning. Knowledge spread quietly, efficiently, and with purpose. Larka's influence grew not through command, but through demonstration. The Baron watched in silence. He had thought he had given a gift, a trivial task for amusement. Instead, he had witnessed a transformation that changed his estate, his staff, and even his perception of what was possible. Larka's final demonstration came when she coordinated a complex sequence involving multiple devices, staff members, and automated systems. Every movement was precise, every action deliberate. The hall filled with awe. She had not only regained control over her body, but had become a teacher, a guide, and a symbol of intelligence and perseverance. Elias stood beside her, quietly proud. "You have become a legend, Larka," he said softly. "Not because of power, not because of force, but because you believed in yourself and allowed others to believe in you." Her eyes met his, bright and confident. She had become more than her father's expectations, more than the estate's doubts. She had become a symbol of hope, potential, and human ingenuity applied across species. The Baron, observing silently, finally understood the lesson. Power and authority could never replace belief, guidance, and patience. Humanity's strength lay in seeing potential, nurturing it, and allowing it to flourish. Larka's story spread across colonies, stations, and distant worlds. She became known not only for her recovery, but for the quiet revolution she had inspired. People whispered of the human engineer who believed in her and the girl who defied neglect through intelligence and willpower. Elias continued his work, remaining in the background. He had not sought fame, recognition, or reward. His satisfaction came from seeing potential realized, from witnessing a mind awaken and grow. Larka, once discarded, was now a living legend. Her journey demonstrated what could be achieved when patience, guidance, and belief were applied. Intelligence, perseverance, and human ingenuity had triumphed, not through force, not through conflict, but through understanding and care. The Baron remained in his chamber, thoughtful and reflective. He had learned a lesson he would not forget. Underestimation of potential, neglect of intelligence, and dismissal of capability could be overcome by those willing to guide, teach, and believe. In that quiet estate, a legend had been born. Larka was no longer a forgotten daughter. She was a symbol of hope and possibility. Elias, the human who had guided her, had shown the universe the power of patience, ingenuity, and belief in potential. And somewhere in the silent halls of the estate, the lessons of humanity echoed: patience, guidance, trust, belief in potential. These were the true powers that no authority, no control, and no expectation could ever surpass. The girl who was supposed to be forgotten had become a living proof that anyone, given care, guidance, and faith, could achieve greatness. And in that story, humanity shone brighter than any star, leaving a legacy that would inspire generations to come.